The Highway Code and Law. Rules for shared use paths relating to pedestrians, cyclists, dogs. Annex 4 of the Highway Code. Definition of a road. It is important to note that references to road therefore generally include footpaths, bridleways, and cycle tracks, and many roadways and driveways on private land, including many car parks. Is the Highway Code actually law? Taken alone, many sections of the Highway Code are not in themselves legally binding. However, those underpinned by the law are clearly identified in the Highway Code with words like must, must not, rather than more advisory references like should or should not. In the hierarchy of road users, pedestrians are regarded as most vulnerable, followed by cyclists, then horse riders. Rule H1. It is important that all road users are aware of the Highway Code, are considerate to other road users, and understand their responsibility for the safety of others. Cyclists, horse riders, and drivers of horse-drawn vehicles likewise have a responsibility to reduce danger to pedestrians. None of this detracts from the responsibility of all road users, including pedestrians, cyclists, and horse riders, to have regard for their own and other road users' safety. Summary of Rule H1. Remember, the term road equally applies to shared use paths and tracks. If you have priority over another path user, this does not absolve you of a duty of care to others. Your dog has no priority whatsoever over other path users. Pedestrians on routes shared with cyclists. Rule 13. Cyclists should respect your safety, see Rule 62, but you should also take care not to obstruct or endanger them. Always remain aware of your environment and avoid unnecessary distractions. Summary of Rule 13. Don't unreasonably obstruct others, provided it is safe to let them pass. Be aware of potential hazards to both you and others, and act accordingly. Your dog, as an unpredictable animal, is a hazard to others if allowed to wander unrestrained. See Rule 56. Cyclists. Rule 62. On such shared use routes, you should always take care when passing pedestrians, especially children, older or disabled people, and allow them plenty of room. Always be prepared to slow down and stop if necessary. Summary of Rule 62. Although this common-sense rule is not mandatory, a cyclist's non-compliance can be used in evidence in any court of law. Cyclists. Rule 63. Slow down when necessary and let them know you are there, for example, by ringing your bell. It is recommended that a bell is fitted to your bike, or by calling out politely. Remember that pedestrians may be deaf, blind, or partially sighted and that this may not be obvious. Do not pass pedestrians, horse riders, or horse-drawn vehicles closely or at high speed, particularly from behind. Summary of Rule 63. Bike bells can be ineffective, particularly in noisy or windy conditions. Make sure that the pedestrian ahead is aware of your presence in plenty of time before you pass. Give them the widest gap possible, cover your brake levers in case you have to stop suddenly. The law on dangerous or careless cycling. An offense of dangerous cycling may be committed on any road or cycle path or lane. Riders who cause bodily harm can be convicted under the 1861 Offences Against the Person Act, which covers wanton and furious driving. The lesser offense of careless cycling carries a maximum fine of £2,500. Pedestrians with dogs. Rule 56. Do not let a dog out on the road on its own. Keep it on a short lead when walking on the pavement, road or path shared with cyclists or horse riders. Summary of Rule 56. Many pedestrians with dogs are unaware, or choose to ignore, Rule 56, which, like much of other highway code guidance, is not, in itself, legally binding. However, to unwisely allow a dog to wander unrestrained, or otherwise effectively out of control on an extended lead, may render the owner liable for substantive damages in any court of law. Even the smallest dog can cause a cyclist to tumble and suffer serious injury. In law, a dog owner is always personally responsible for the actions of their canine, and if the animal is deemed dangerously out of control, a punitive fine, or even a custodial sentence is possible. The following is text, copied from the UK Government online information document which is titled Controlling Your Dog, in Public. It's against the law to let a dog be dangerously out of control anywhere, such as in a public place. The law applies to all dogs. Your dog is considered dangerously out of control if it injures someone, makes someone worried that it might injure them. You can get an unlimited fine, or be sent to prison for up to 6 months, or both, if your dog is dangerously out of control. You may not be allowed to own a dog in the future, and your dog may be destroyed. If you let your dog injure someone, you can be sent to prison for up to 5 years, or fined, or both. If you allow your dog to kill someone, you can be sent to prison for up to 14 years, or get an unlimited fine, or both. The following video extracts are examples of cyclists passing pedestrians, or cyclists passing cyclists, or cyclists passing pedestrians with dogs. In each example, decide for yourself who, if any, has demonstrated a lack of duty of care to others. What breach of highway code, or other law, has taken place? Warning. Some of these video clips include abusive foul language, serious injury, dogs dangerously out of control. Nothing untoward here. The cyclist passes the 2 pedestrians with a wide margin. Keeps well clear of a dog walker with his canine on a short lead. Cyclists should be on guard, however, in potentially busy areas, particularly near car parks. Encountering pedestrians quite often can include children, or an unrestrained dog that may run into your path.
Thanks. Another one behind.
Remember, in windy environments or background traffic noise, bike bells can be ineffective. Make sure the pedestrians ahead are clearly aware of your presence, before you pass. In this instance, both glanced back, moved to one side, and continue walking briskly. The cyclist overtook as far right as possible, while drawing to their attention there was another cyclist following.
Wide on your right. Another hooligan behind.
There could have been a potential issue here. The cyclist did provide an advance warning, while the runner acknowledged by moving perceptibly to the left, but did not look back over his shoulder. As a precaution, the cyclist gave a verbal warning, also advising another rider was closely following. No serious issue here, but the cyclist could have passed more slowly, and thanked the pedestrian. When walking on shared paths, and hearing a warning from behind, it's always prudent to glance back, never assume it's just one ordinary bicycle approaching.
All right.
Nothing untoward here. The cyclist made the pedestrians aware in good time, and passing as wide as possible. Both walkers had plenty of time to react, kindly permitting the cyclist to pass with ease. Their dogs were safely restrained, on short leads, at no risk to themselves, or other path users.
Thanks a lot. Woof.
This is a good example of sharing with care, by following the rules. The cyclists gave plenty of advanced warning, allowing the pedestrians plenty of time to react. All dogs were on short leads, keeping them safe, as well as minimizing the risk to other path users.
Hey, come here. You haven't come finish yet. Ready? Stand still. Thank you. Okay.
Never assume that if a pedestrian has his dog restrained, that there aren't others about to step into your path. In this clip, there was the potential for the large stick to get trapped in a wheel, sending an unwary cyclist, head first, over the handlebars. Rule H1, Rule 56. This is a typical example, where an unrestrained dog is at risk to itself, and other path users. In law, the owner can be held personally liable, for both damage and injury, caused by their dog.
Toby, come here. What's this? Wait a minute.
Bringing a large pack of dogs, with some wandering free, can only demonstrate a poor regard for the safety of other path users. Likewise, ignorance or indifference to Rule H1, Rule 13, and Rule 56. Although the dog owner made the effort to retrieve their dog, there was significant risk to cyclists approaching for the opposite direction had the unrestrained dogs stepped into their path. Rule H1, Rule 56. Here the cyclist did provide 2 warnings, but mistakenly assumed the pedestrian, and his dog on a lead, was waiting to be passed. As a consequence, the cyclist's approach was faster than it should have otherwise been. Rule 62 and 63.
Slow down! Fucking hell, you dickhead!
In the event the pedestrian had 2 dogs wandering free on the path, and had made no attempt to restrain them. Was the cyclist entirely at fault? Clearly the pedestrian thought so, based on his foul-mouthed tirade, most of which has been edited out. Having already been passed by numerous other cyclists, the pedestrian should have been aware of the risk to other path users, as well as his dogs. He made no attempt to mitigate the hazard or minimize the obstruction to others, Rule H1 and Rule 13. As a pedestrian, he had priority over all other users, but his dogs did not. Rule 56. Under the Dangerous Dogs Act 1991, these dogs are dangerously out of control. The law applies to all dogs, not just certain breeds. While deliberately allowing the dogs to chase not just one, but a number of passing cyclists, the irresponsible owner could have faced severe penalties, had the local police been able to establish his identity. Even in low-speed tumbles, a cyclist can suffer a potentially life-changing injury. This clip is in slow motion. In this incident, thankfully unrelated to a dog, the fall resulted in the rider being unconscious for a number of minutes, despite wearing a helmet. Rushed to hospital, his injuries included concussion, a broken arm and ribs. Any untethered dog can easily cause a similar outcome, with the owner subsequently facing a substantial claim for damages. It's not just unrestrained dogs that can be a hazard to cyclists.
Morning.
Some cyclists can be a hazard to other cyclists. Unless you are cycling abroad, it is customary to cycle on the left. This clip is in slow motion. It's particularly important to cycle on the left-hand side when negotiating a blind corner. As a priority, if you are taking youngsters out on a cycle ride, particularly in a large group, teach them to cycle on the left, and never be more than 2 abreast. Especially if the route is narrow or obscured. It's never too early to learn.
She likes them.
Never assume that a pedestrian, who is directly walking towards you, is aware that you are approaching, particularly if they are using a mobile phone or wearing earphones. For children, always slow right down and stop as necessary in all circumstances. In this instance, how many responsible parents would allow their children to run unsupervised into the path of groups of approaching cyclists? The rest of this clip is in slow motion.
Holy hell! Hither, darling!
A final summary. Although you may, or may not, agree with all the narrative on the video clips, it is undeniable that the Highway Code, another law, applies to all users on shared use routes. In the event of injury or damage, your ignorance of the rules won't be a defense in any court of law. Everyone should be aware of potential dangers and act accordingly. Don't unreasonably obstruct or put other path users at risk. Never place the onus of safety for you or your dog on others while disregarding rules yourself. Always take care, and don't assume others are going to abide by the rules. In short, share with care.